Hello, my name is Adel. I'm a software developer, and last 4 or 5 years, I usually work on Laravel projects. And also, I would like to build tools which increases my productivity. If you use PHP Storm, you probably have one of them installed. I just didn't want to copy-paste environment variables and just wrote a plugin to auto complete it. I decided to make this talk after watching Cruddy by Design by Adel Faizrakhmanov. It was a great talk when he extracted the logic from 1 or 2 big controllers to several smaller ones using true REST way. I just wanted to share my point of view to this problem. First of all, projects are very different. Some patterns or techniques can be very good for one project, but useless or even harmful for another one. My last projects are very big. This is some statistics from my previous project. We have 4 PHP developers in the team. It was a very popular application. We had 190 million users registered, and there were very interesting tasks based on the performance. My current project, a bit bigger. We have a team of 15 PHP developers working on almost 1 million lines of PHP code. So I started to prefer solutions which is more stable, more prepared for being broken, and keep this in mind during listening me. Object-oriented programming. When people talk about it, they usually give very strange examples like class animal or class docs extend animal. And I decided to do the same. A handshake, very common action. Let's code it. How we usually do it? Someone offers hand for person, and we just implement this action by using person's right hand. And every time I see this code, I imagine how someone tears off person's right hand, makes a handshake with it, and return back. Seriously, the person doesn't control his hand. Something outside just gets it, makes some action with it, and don't ask any permission. What if right hand is broken? For some people, handshake is very important. If they want to do it, even in that case, how it usually happens? My right hand is broken. Someone offers hand to me. I use left hand, and that's it. Ritual is executed. We add a little condition to our code. We check if right hand is broken, and use left hand for that. I want to suggest another implementation of this logic. I want to create class person with handshake method in it, and in our handshake action, we just call this method. This refactoring already good. We moved our logic to the right place, to a person. And I create 2 person classes. One of them is healthy person, who uses right hand for this action, and person with broken right hand, who uses left hand for that. Let's compare these 2 different styles of implement your logic. Sometimes people just don't want to make a handshake. In our procedural version of code, we add some check and refuse handshake. It looks simple here, but in real projects, in real tasks, developer have to go to this action. It might be 100 lines of code written by another developer 5 years ago. It might be not simple. In our object-oriented version, we just create a new class, hermaphobe, who just refuses any handshakes. It's different type of thinking. If you need some change, you just create a new class. Another requirement, implement high-if action. How we usually do it? Just copy-paste handshake action and make some changes here. Everyone does that. But differences might be not very simple. For example, this check might be removed because everyone likes high fives. Look at this guy. Who can say no to him? But this little part of logic, like using a left hand instead of right hand, starting to appear here and here in a tenth other places in the project. And then we realize that left hand also might be broken. And implementing this change in our project might take a lot of time. OK, it's enough about this example. If you want to read a lot more about it, you can read about feature envy code smell from Martin Fowler and information expert from Grasp. And it's all about one of the basic principles of object-oriented programming, encapsulation, when class hides its inner structure just by implementing interface like handshake or high five. I only want to make one conclusion from here. When we implement read actions like get post by ID or get published post, we are really interested on these fields like title, text, published. But when we implement write action, we just should forget about all these properties and create a method which just implements what user wants to do with this entity. Users don't want to just create and update a post. Sometimes we really create it, but sometimes we want to just change details. Sometimes we will publish or unpublish it. Sometimes developers go deeper and just totally separate these classes. We create read model post with properties, and they create write model which only has public methods implementing actions what users want to do with this entity. It's called common query responsibility segregation, or CQRS. And tomorrow we have talk about event sourcing, and I'm looking forward to learn more about it. One of the basic principles of domain-driven design, DDD, is ubiquitous language. It postulates that developers in his code should use the same language as our users or customers use to describe our logic. If users say publish the post, in our code, we also should say like post, publish, or something like that. But developers usually prefer more technical language, like set published property to true and save it to database. Why it happens? Usually, starting to create an architecture for the application, developers firstly think about how to store the data. They create database tables first, and then they need a user interface. And obvious solution just represent database table as is in our user interface firstly comes to mind. And here we are with our CRUD UI, typical, just direct representation of database table in our user interface. We have a list of rows in with ability to add and edit them. However, as I said in the title, our world is not a cruddy by design. Even simple post entity starts to have a behavior like publishing or unpublishing. And when we have this typical CRUD UI, we sometimes need to understand what really happened, what really user wants to do. And once I met something like that, if published property is dirty and post is published, that means user just published this post, just clicks checkbox button, publish it, and clicks to save. Then, if it happens something in post-updating eloquent event listener, it's very hard to debug this. I want to show a little example from my real projects. We store orders for conference in typical CRUD design. And we have total and status with an amount of possible statuses were increasing and increasing. And this simple user interface become more and more complex for users. Once we just decided to totally rewrite it using the language users use for orders. If user wants to cancel, he just clicks cancel. If user wants to fulfill the order, he just clicks fulfill. And we immediately get a lot of advantages from it. For example, now we can make much more powerful authorization. We can allow for some user cancel orders and disallow it for another ones. Another advantage, this example I've stolen from a refactoring to actions article by Frick van der Herten. And here he publishes the post and then tweets about it. These actions, which happens after main actions, are usually called post actions. I usually prefer event system. When I publish a post, I just generate event about that. Event, post-published, not post-updated. It's post-published. It's important difference. And then, when system knows that some post is published, we can configure the post actions here in event service provider. Here we postulate that if post is published, we make a tweet about it. If you think it's too over-engineered, I can show example from one of my real projects. This event, like post, was chosen by editor as very good. And our post actions about it, like we log this action, we send this post to translation to other languages, we clear post cache from memcache, we update elastic index for searching, and also make two internal API calls. And this is really convenient to configure all our post actions in here. Okay, returning back to our idea of different model for reading and writing, no new modern technologies also built based on this idea. If we want to read, we just read property of state objects of Redux or views. I forgot to say, I think probably you know. Redux or Vue.js, it's data storages for modern front-end frameworks like React or Vue. We just get data from state object, but if you want to change it, we should call a mutator. So data flow in Vue looks like that. We use mutators like publish post for changing the data and getters for getting them. Absolutely the same idea in GraphQL. GraphQL is a new standard for APIs. And if we want to change the data, we call a mutator request. And if we want to just fetch some data, we use a query. What about REST? Everyone likes REST. But REST is ideally suited for interfaces or APIs which just represent database tables. All actions of resource controller just copies pages from typical CRUD UI. REST has a simple rules like use only resources known in the URL and 5 predefined HTTP verbs: get, post, put, and you should describe all your business logic using this pure language. My favorite example is just user banning. Sometimes moderators want to ban some user, and I just Google REST API ban user and get a lot of different implementation of this action. Some developers just patch user by banned true. Another developer changes user status to banned. Another example, ban status resource, totally strange. Sometimes developers just don't care about REST and uses verbs here in the address. And Adel Faizrakhmanov, in his talk, just suggests to create a banned user. Sometimes some developers just say the REST is a standard, but I don't understand. Even the simple action like banning the user can be implemented 5 different implementations, but I can find another 5 easily. I just don't understand why we're still using REST. Does it help us to build a more API? It doesn't use the language our users use. User says just ban this user. But here we have like delete banned user or post banned user. I don't think it's simple. But when young developers want to build API, he thinks that REST is the only possible way. Here is an example from one of chats when developers wanted to implement one action, just posting the comment, and he used a resource controller for that. One of the base principles of software development is keep it simple. I don't feel REST is simple. If you want to make something more close to your language users use, one of the best options is GraphQL. GraphQL not only contains the very powerful query language, but their mutators are very close to user language. Mutators can be called like publish post or update or change post details or something like that. But if not GraphQL, you can use just natural English addresses. If you want to publish post, you can use entity name and verb, post publish, post create, post unpublish. Using just create, publish, and post doesn't look very good. Also, when you trying to analyze your controllers, actually get actions and post actions are very different. They really makes different type of jobs. They solve different types of problems. If we talk about get actions, it's all about query performance or caching. If we talk about post action, it's all about data consistency, transactions, post actions, etc. And that's why I decided to separate these actions to different controllers. I have, for example, post queries controller for all read actions, and just post controller for all write actions. And later, I'll add another reason to do that. Adel Faizrakhmanov, in his talk, extracted logic to another controller just to have all published or unpublished logic, for example, in one place. It's very good advice. But it can be done without creating a resource controller. Just use Laravel routing. It's very powerful and flexible. You can just set up needed URLs and to needed controllers, and that's all. But you don't always need to extract the logic to own controllers. This is example how I extract my logic. For example, I want to publish the post. I create publish post command. It's very close to actions for the same article, refactoring to actions. It just publish the post and dispatch needed event, like post published. And these commands helps to me to use language that my users use inside my application. If somewhere in the app I want to publish the post, I just use publish post command. And my write controllers usually looks like that. I just ask needed request, ask needed command, and just execute with this command and return success result. And my write controllers usually looks like that. They are full of simple 2 lines actions. And this structure is very stable. It can live years without any changes. And I don't know why we should just extract publish logic from this controller, because logic already extracted to commands. Okay, conclusion. First of all, know your project. Know your project needs, what it needs, what patterns will be good for that, will not. If your model is really cruddy, you just need to create and update that. You can use something like Laravel Nova and don't make this logic by own. If not, just use your user's language. Use the full power of Laravel routing. Thank you.